Okay, so I'm here now with author Andrew Ross. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you.
How long have you been working with Fantom?
It's 5 years now. The Joan Sims book was the first one in 2014, and then a reissue of the Carry On book, and now the Peggy Mount book.
Excellent. So, the Joan Sims book. I look at the two books, and I've got Peggy and Joan there, and for me, you couldn't actually have two more contrasting characters, and I'm sure during the course of the next sort of few minutes we'll unearth some of those qualities of those characters. What is it about Joan Sims that inspired you to take a path and write a book about her?
Well, she's always been my favourite actress ever since I was a child, and I watched her in a TV series called Simon and the Witch when I was about 10, and from there became a fan of the Carry On films. And I think it's just her versatility as an actress. She could do anything really, obviously primarily comedy, but such versatility and that sparkle in her eyes, which more or less made everyone laugh as soon as you looked at her before she even said a line.
I mean, there's many facets to her character, aren't there? Let's be honest.
Definitely, yes.
And very private lady, but so many different sides to her. Did you uncover quite a bit about her as you went through the book?
Yeah, she was quite a complex person, a lot of insecurities, I think, stemming from her childhood. As you say, a very private person, quite a needy person, but very well loved by friends and colleagues. She had a very likeable quality about her, and people were drawn to her a lot. But she had a lot of personal demons, which sort of blighted her life.
And where did Joan's career start?
She started, she always said, when she was a child performing, her father was a station master, and she'd perform on the railway platform, dressing up when she was 3, 4, 5. And she went on to do amateur dramatics and went to RADA eventually. So she did it more or less all of her life, and she was still working at the very end of her life as well. So it was a 50-year plus career.
Very big in theatre before the Carry On films, I'm
Yes,
assuming.
that's where it all started, in theatre reviews actually, where she'd do all sorts of different things, sketches and singing and dancing, and then of course moved into to films at the end of the early 50s she started, but by the end of the 50s, that was when the film career took off, and then of course the Carry-Ons from 1959 onwards.
Did she come from a theatrical family?
Not at all, and her parents weren't happy about her doing it. But she managed to make her own way, I guess. But no, her parents definitely weren't happy about that profession.
How did Joan look on the Carry On films? Because I know a number of the actors involved would look down their noses just a little bit at some of it. But how did Joan feel about those?
She loved them. Kenneth Williams was obviously quite snooty about them, and would get the script, but did them year after year. But she absolutely loved them, and it was that family atmosphere that she really enjoyed. And she always said it was like going back to school after the 6 weeks, reuniting with all of the friends, especially Kenneth Williams and Hattie, who she was very good friends with. So yes, she absolutely adored the Carry-Ons. And even at the end, when the series started to decline a little bit, she was still there till the bitter end, as it were.
Is it true that Kenneth Williams actually proposed to Joan?
It is indeed true, yes.
Well, there's a story behind that?
I think he got to a period in his life where he thought he needed someone in his life. She got to a point in her life where the romances had stopped, and he thought, well, we get on well, why not? And needless to say, she declined the offer. She realised it wouldn't work. But yes, it apparently is true, believe it or not.
That's quite surprising. How did you set about researching into the life of Joan Sims?
It started through the first book, Carry On Actors, where obviously she's included in that as one of the stars of the films. And I had a lot of research material already, and I was aware that she'd written her autobiography just before she died, but there wasn't an actual biography. And I contacted her next of kin, who were quite happy to help me with that and approve. Well, it's the authorised biography, approved it, and a lot of her friends helped as well, and gave tremendous insight really into the private life of her. And she didn't talk about that in a great amount of detail in her autobiography, so that's what emerges from the authorised biography, is the private side of her life.
And that's I think is the part that I think people will find very interesting about it when they read it, because she was such a private person, and I think for you to have been able to have uncovered some of the personality behind the name, I think is a great thing. How long did the book take you to research and to write?
A couple of years, I guess, because I'm not a full-time writer, but I wanted to get as much information as possible and contact as many of her friends and colleagues who were still around. So yeah, I guess a couple of years on and off.
What was the most surprising thing you took out of that research about Joan? What was the thing that surprised you the most about her?
I wouldn't say there's any great surprises, because I kind of knew about her life and her career. I think the biggest thing was the intense impact that Gladys, her mother, had on her life. It really was intense, and not in a positive manner. A lot of people said that she ruined Joan's life, and obviously that's a matter of opinion. I don't think personally that she did, but she certainly had a massive impact on her life and her decisions and her romances and chances of happiness.
So a big Carry On fan then, I'm assuming, if you went through and did the
Yes,
first
yes.
book there, which is a focus on the actors itself. So that's feels like a bit of a labour of love for sure. What encouraged you to take up looking into the background, if you like, on all the actors in the Carry On films?
It started actually through writing to Joan Sims, and I got a letter back and an autograph, and I thought, oh, I'll write to a few more. So I did, and a lot of them responded with letters, with memories of the films, and thank you for writing, and I remember this on set. And that inspired me to write to more and more. And eventually I amassed this collection of stories from the actors, and I thought, really, this should be in a book. And there hadn't been a who's who of the entire series, perhaps not surprisingly, considering the work involved in it. But yes, that's what inspired it all.
And what's your favourite Carry On film?
I've got 4 actually.
Oh, go on
I can't
then.
pinpoint one. I've got Carry On Up the Khyber, Carry On Abroad, Carry On Screaming, and Carry On Camping.
So
It's
Carry
a
On...
mixed bag.
A mixed bag, it certainly is. Carry On Up the Khyber, all studio bound, as I recall.
No, some of it was actually filmed.
Really?
Where do you think?
Well, it's going to be
In
Boreham Wood. Is it?
Wales.
Oh, Wales.
Yes.
Okay, right, okay. I thought it was all studio bound, that one. Carry On Abroad is actually my favourite. Would you now, looking back on the way that you approached the work on Joan Sims' book, would you approach it any differently, or did it actually lead you to approach the work on the Peggy Mount book in a different way?
It made the Peggy Mount book slightly easier, because I kind of knew what I was doing, which avenues to explore to get to where I needed to be. So it was a big learning curve, and the actual physical aspect of writing the book was made a lot easier through doing the first biography. So yeah, that was a massive learning curve to do that. And the Peggy Mount book, I guess, was a lot easier, because I'd already done that kind of research. I knew which avenues to explore.
As I said back at the start of this interview, for me there are 2 very distinctly different characters, Joan Sims, Peggy Mount. My childhood memories of Peggy actually are that she scared me to death, I think, as I grew up. She was a very formidable lady. Is that the real Peggy Mount?
To a degree, yes. She would argue with me. She'd probably haunt me, because she always said she wasn't anything like that battle axe image. But there's certainly elements of that in her real life character. A lot of people have said that she wasn't like that at all, but there are slight elements there, definitely. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. She constantly shouted on screen. She had this big booming voice, but in real life she didn't need to shout. It was the look, and a lot of people have said the look that Peggy, gave people. It was just the death stare, as it were. She was a complete professional. She expected everyone else to be completely professional too. And as Geoffrey Holland said, she didn't suffer fools gladly, or indeed at all. It was, she was a complete professional. She wanted the job done properly. So yes, she was formidable to an extent, but there was again an insecurity about her, again stemming from the childhood, I think, in that she had a difficult relationship with her mother and her sister, and as a result of that, I think she put up barriers which prevented people from getting to the real Peggy. So I think there's only a handful of people who actually got to know who she really was.
And you approached the research, as you said already, in a slightly different way on this one. It was easier because you had some findings from previous. Again, in this book, were there any surprises that you came across that you weren't expecting to?
The relationship with the mother and the sister, again, was quite complex. And because Peggy was intensely private and because her sister was intensely private, it was very difficult to get to the bottom of that. And I didn't really get to the bottom of what happened between the pair of them. It was a 40-year falling out, and they still weren't reconciled when Peggy died. But they didn't speak to each other for 40 or 50 years. But because Nancy, her sister, was very private and Peggy was very private, their separate circle of friends never really got to the bottom of what caused that massive falling out. So I guess that's the one big thing in the book.
And did you get access to family members, or did you meet family members or any relations in any way during the course of either of the two books, actually, to either of the ladies?
With Joan Sims, yes. Her next of kin, as I said earlier, approved the book, authorised it, and obviously gave insight into the background and her childhood and her later years as well. With Peggy, it was much more difficult because she didn't have any family. Not immediate family anyway. She never married, she didn't have children. Her sister had died several years ago. And it was friends, it was her two closest friends who provided, I guess, the backbone of the book, really.
I remember Peggy Mount acting opposite Pat Coombs. And that is an odd pairing if ever we came across one.
Well, I compare them to Laurel and Hardy, a sort of female version of Laurel, even physically, you know, because Patty Coombs was tall and thin and Peggy wasn't. But it was Pat Coombs who inspired me to write the book, because I'd contacted her for Carry On Actors, because she was in 2 of the Carry On films. And from there we became friends and pen pals. And I met her a few times. And at the end of their lives, their respective lives, the pair of them ended up in Denville Hall together, which is the actors' retirement home. So it was kind of like art imitating life, because they'd done that TV series together where they were living in a nursing home. And in the last couple of years, they ended up living together. But it was Patty's letters that she'd send quite regularly, where she mentions Peggy. And I wasn't really familiar with Peggy's work at that point. But what emerged from the letters was that this was quite a formidable, strong character. And at the end, in Denville Hall, she really was the queen. She ruled the roost, as it were. And as I say, it was Patty who kind of planted the seed. And I thought, well, there's nothing out there on Peggy Mount. Let's explore and see what we can find.
It must have been a very nice seal of approval on the Joan Sims book to get her family to effectively authorise it and say this is something that we're happy to sort of be in the public domain. I'm sure they gave you good comments.
Yes, it was an absolute dream come true, really, because as I said, she was and is my favourite actress, and to write the biography was an honour, and then to have it authorised was just the icing on the cake, as it were. But yes, they were very pleased with it. There was nothing that they wanted removed or edited or altered. It was all there. I've been quite discreet in a lot of things, because a lot of things were said to me in confidence, and obviously I wouldn't want to ruin that trust.
Both very interesting reads, I can assure you. And what are you working on just now?
I'm looking into another biography, but it's still in the infancy, and possibly something on a TV series, but we'll see. Time will tell.
And hopefully we'll see that book come through Fantom in the future.
Yes, definitely.
Andrew, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you this afternoon. Thanks
you.
very much for taking some time with us.
Thank you.